Greetings to us and welcome to another video. We are still in the WCQ season. There are a couple of things we still have left over, as well as new set releases that will be most likely impact a couple of the nationals that we still have ongoing. Battles of Legends Terminal Revenge is one of them that is coming this week, and then in exactly 1 month by the time of this recording will be Infinite Forbidden, which is another game-changing set. Until the release of the aforementioned sets, we're still in what we can call Legacy of Destruction format. During set format, we have a couple newcomers that entered the meta game. Beforehand, we had Phantom Nightmare, which was like the throne of Snake Eyes, like overtaking the format. Then after Legacy of Destruction, we had a few recognizable contenders such as Tempai Dragons, Melodious, Jubel, Voiceless Voice. Like all those decks got a little bit more support. The main takeaway that we can talk about is how like Melodious has been played by pro players as of late, like Joshua Smith, Jesse Cotton, Herman Hansen, just to talk a few like notable players. And then we had Tempai Dragons, which outside of the national scene has been rampant. Like if you're playing like regionals and locals, that deck is pretty much everywhere. In the national seasons, not as much. Not as much on the big major events. But there is one other theme that got introduced in that set that didn't take off until very recent, and that theme is Ragnaraika. I already talked about Ragnaraika in this channel. If you're interested, feel free to just scroll in the channel. You will find like an introduction to that set. I want to talk about Ragnaraika this weekend because the engine of Ragnaraika itself made it to the final of both Germany and UK nationals. And what do I mean by that? Before I get to the explanation behind Ragnaraika, I kind of want to grasp on like how important these two events are. The German national had around 2,100 players, while the UK nationals had around 1,300, which is a very respectable player size for both events. Prior to these two events, the biggest nationals that we had was the one in France that had around 2,300 players, and outside of those events, the biggest event that we had like prior to this month was YCS Indianapolis that had around 1,800 players. So gauging these two events is more than fair when it comes to like the representation of the decks and strategies that have been doing well beforehand. So I don't have the data for the UK nationals. However, in Germany nationals, shoutouts to Lampy YGO, we have the top cut of top 64. And as you can see here, Snake Eyes is still a very dominant force. However, there is something I kind of want to take away, and it's the fact that one, Tempai Dragons are gaining steam. Like they did have a good amount of representation in Top Cut, but the more important part is plants. We can see here that there are 3 plant players on top 64. The reason I'm mentioning plants, besides the other decks, and the reason this is important is because all 3 plant players converted into top 8. So in Germany nationals, all 3 plant players made it all the way up to the top 8. At least that's from what I've heard. People can correct me in the comments if they have like further information on that. And not only did plants make it to top 8, but they also made it to the finals. And not only did it make it to the finals, it ended up winning the event. Shout out to Julius. I think he won last year's nationals as well, and he also piloted a plant themed deck. So That is very, very, very impressive. But what is more impressive as well is that in the UK Nationals, Plants also made it to the finals. So, and I think it also made top 16, which was a partner of Jessica. Um, and Jessica even showcased the deck on stream, like in the mid of the event. So not only did she showed her strategy, but she also showed like how it can be properly played, what updates have the plant deck has had, and now we're going to go back and talk about Ragnaraika. So this is the current list that Jessica had. Julia's list is very similar. The biggest difference would be like Rika Cheat is in the side deck, and they played more copies of Rika Pedal, and like a few of the non-engine cards got switched around. Like they played one Con, but the fundamental like engine is pretty much the same. They played the Reptile Therion instead of the Regulus. But yeah, so what is the biggest takeaway from Plants this weekend? Why did they perform so well? How did they overthrow Snake Eyes? I think the one important thing that we need to talk about is the format itself. If you saw Italian Nationals that happened around like 2 weeks ago, we already know that most Snake Eye players, well, not most Snake Eye players, but a good portion of them have been switching around their non-engine. A lot of people have been inclined of just playing less hand traps because there are two really big cards in the format that is just taking advantage of the hand trap build, and those two cards are Triple Tactic Talents and Crossout Designator. These are two really big cards in the format, and when you are in a hand trap heavy format and the hand traps are very predictable, you're going to see an engine like this where they just comprised of Crossout and then just have like every hand trap that you can think of that can just be utilized alongside the Crossout. This is an OCG building mentality. This is what I called like the OCG Crossout engine. Basically, you just play 3 Crossout and you just play one copy of each disruption card that you just don't want to see like handled by Crossout. And what's good about this engine is that all these cards that you want to Crossout, if you end up drawing them, they are not bad cards at all. They are not real bricks because these are just non-engine defensive cards that you can just utilize along Crossout or alongside your engine. And the other really big takeaway is that the end boards that people are making in this format are not really impactful, and this goes back to like the last Forbidden Limited list. The last list banned Baron the Floor and they banned Burrow Savage Dragon. Those two cards were really big boss monsters that were easily made in a lot of strategies, and the reason that impact is important is because of Evenly Mashed and Dark Ruler No More and Forbidden Droplets, as well as Triple Tactic Talents. These are all really strong cards, and some of these cards, if they resolve, they are just as impactful as just resolving one or two hand traps. Snake Eyes got to a point where their board is very strong, but I think a lot of people just got tunnel visioned into seeing the strong boards they can make and the level of recursion that the strategy can hold, and they just opted to be afraid of how their end boards were shaping up, and that's why we were playing a lot of hand traps. But now, with a more established metagame, with Snake Eyes like being as dominant as it is as a force, like people just come to realize that just relying on hand traps in your opening hand is just not very consistent. The opening 2 hand traps in like a 40 card strategy, if you play around 14 of them, is like around that 55 to 60% chance, which is not really high odds. you need more than one hand trap to just stop Snake Eyes. That deck has a plethora of extenders. That deck has a really strong game plan. Like if you don't play a really impactful hand trap, like for example Dimension Shifter, you will get folded out by Snake Eyes even with your -1 from your hand trap. And to make matters worse, a lot of players are on triple talents, meaning that if you just hand trap them, you just fall into a big situation. Now we're going to the point where the board breakers come in. Jess was very smart on her deck building. Pretty much the way she just made her strategy, she pretty much capitalized on like the plant engine itself, but at the same time they just dedicated a lot of non-engine into just a bunch of board breakers, because opening 2 board breakers is just as strong as opening 2 hand traps, at least in this current state of the format until like we adapt. So resolving evenly is very strong, resolving talents is very strong, resolving dark ruler or droplets just shut down a couple of decks including Snake Eye. So that's one thing that they had going for them. The other thing that they had going for them is Rivalry of the Warlords. This card is very powerful. I wouldn't be surprised if this card ends up in the Forbidden list eventually. I think like a lot of players are starting to understand and realize that the monopoly of like monotype decks is going to be like surging with this card as a main deck staple. That's why you see Tempai Dragons doing very well. That's why you see like Jubel also be doing very well as a strategy. Like any deck that can play this card will play this card. Melodious is another really strong contender. Like all these monotype decks, as long as this card exists, they pretty much just have a very strong edge against Snake Eye or other hybrid strategies. So now we go back to Ragnaraika and just talk about Ragnaraika itself. So in the January list of this year, we had Dryas and we had Healer, both limited. This was a very unorthodox hit to many players when it happened, because Plant was not a dominant force that format. However, I feel like having these 2 cards limited was one of the best decisions that Konami made, like as a future like perspective, because if we have the Aroma engine and then we have Ragnaraika as an engine, and we just have all these strong plant extenders that we just keep getting for this deck, this deck just becomes way too powerful. It just becomes really hard to stop. And just having facilitated ways to get to these cards like more than once without like making some like main deck decisions, and just like the relying on more extenders, just really bolsters this strategy to a level that's probably paired up with Snake Eyes, if not even more. That being said, we might hit a we might get a plant hit eventually in the future. I think if they ever going to hit this deck again, they're probably going to hit a Aroma Seraphi Jasmine. This is like the best card in the deck. This is like the best extender, the best link monster. This is basically their stepping stone. This card is very powerful. Like it's on par with Crystal Halki 5-Rex and Summon Sorceress, and those 2 cards are forbidden. But obviously this is like more geared towards plants. Like this card is like very strong. I say this deck is pretty much on the same level as Dragon Link, where if you remember Dragon Link, that strategy was very powerful for a couple of years now, and instead of just hitting like the main deck very thoroughly, they just did a bunch of changes to the deck. Like they errata the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, they banned like 2 of the Guard Dragon link monsters, they banned Boral Savage even though that was not a direct Dragon Link hit. Like they limited Bestial Magnamort, which was another big one. They limited Chaos Space, which is another one. Like if you look at Dragon Link in a vacuum, that strategy is still intact. But if you look around a lot of key players that played that around that strategy, like we've had a lot of just like minor hits. They just don't kill the engine itself, but they just significantly weaken how they do their embarks. But yeah, I mainly just wanted to talk about like plants and Ragnaraika, because the moment these Ragnaraika cards came out in Legacy of Destruction, I knew it was only a matter of time until they found a home for them. And like right now the plant engine is like very strong for this team. In the future we might get more Ragnaraka cards. We might get like other I'm not gonna say tri-type, because tri-type is like the original like mention for Tri-Brigade, but we might get like reptile plant or insect support that is just way too powerful in the future and just pairs well with Ragnaraka. So I'd say this is a worthwhile engine in investing in the future. Uh, and not necessarily for plants, but just for other strategies in the, like sometime around. And will plants still dominate the format? I don't think so. I think what mainly happened is just a lot of players disrespecting the strategy. I think this deck has a very solid foundation in the format, but same as Snake Eyes is one of those strategies that once you just know what they do, you can pretty much predict like their foothold and just start playing cards that are appropriate for them. So this was mainly going to talk about Rika and Ragnaraika, but I also want to talk about Labyrinth. Like Labyrinth made top four at the Germany nationals, and Labyrinth is a really strong deck against plants. Like if you're like looking into a strategy that just wants to like dedicate its win rate against plants, but also like overlap for Snake Eyes and other strategies, I'd say Labyrinth is a good one. This particular Labyrinth build was playing this card right here, Simultaneous Equation Cannons. This card is very complex. Not many people know how to play this card. However, this card did get resolved downstream. And not only did it get resolved downstream, but one player made it all the way to top 4 with this card in their deck. Labyrinth is pretty much the best strategy that can play this card, because you really don't need your extra deck outside of like maybe 1 or 2 cards. So you can literally dedicate your entire extra deck into just resolving this card. This card is a very strong blowout. If it resolves, like there's very little chance you lose the duel, because this is just a one-sided board nuke that vanishes for your opponent. And like if you know math, then you might be able to resolve this card more than not. It is very complicated at first, but then over time you get a hang to it. I might make another video just talking about this more in depth, but mainly just wanted to talk about plants. I hope you found this video informative and to your liking and understanding. More videos coming soon. Like I said, like earlier, we do have Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge coming this week, so expect content involving that. Until then, keep practicing and keep dueling.